Orleans. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Fall 2020 Virtual Town Hall for Arts Education in New Orleans. My name is Celeste Key. I'm the director of the New Orleans Arts Education Alliance, and we're co-hosting this event with the Education Research Alliance and the New Orleans Arts Council. I think for everyone tuning in on YouTube and Facebook, it is no secret that we're living through exceedingly difficult times. We are 7 months into a global pandemic that has already deeply impacted our community, especially our arts and music community. And we're preparing now for yet another storm during one of the most active hurricane seasons on record. So knowing all that, we deeply, deeply appreciate all of you for coming together tonight to discuss the children of our community and their need for high quality, equitable, joyful, and life-affirming arts and music experiences to help them through these difficult times and to prepare them for futures of creative leadership. We're all in this for the children. So welcome, everybody. First, we would like to share a brief message from the Orleans Parish School Board Superintendent, Dr. Lewis, outlining the district's current commitment to arts education.
If you ask anyone around the world about New Orleans, I'm sure they'll mention our wonderful arts and music. No matter anytime you come to the city of New Orleans, you will be able to see the beautiful artwork as well as hear the sound of music all throughout the city of New Orleans. Well, that same concept is true about NOLA Public Schools. We have awesome art programs as well as music programs. And today, I want to just give a little insight about our programs here at NOLA Public Schools, but no better way to talk about our program except through our students.
There are great examples of art all around us. We have music, theater, art, and dance classes. We have incredible bands marching down the streets. You don't have to look far to see great examples of talent and interest in the art.
No doubt. This unusual school year has challenged my teachers to rethink how learning looks in the classroom. I hope we can still have fun and creative ways to express our learning.
Orleans Parish School Board is helping us out. They passed a resolution to partner with Artists Corp of New Orleans. This means there will be teacher groups that help make rules for our arts education.
NOLA Public Schools promise to continue whole child education. Shout out to board member Sarah Houston for her passion in education.
So first of all, I want to give a shout out to our amazing students who share a little about our arts and music programs here at NOLA Public Schools. But in order for our students to be awesome, we also have to, and I want to make sure that I take the time to give a huge shout out to our amazing talented art and music educator throughout the city of New Orleans, because we know that our students cannot be talented unless they have a great teacher. And so we're very thankful for all of our educators who are instructing our students in the area of music and art. So today, I'm so excited to hear and learn more about how we as a school system can continue to work to improve our arts and music program throughout the city of New Orleans, even in the midst of COVID-19.
All right, thank you, Dr. Lewis. And I'm also excited to present our student performer and panelist tonight. Melvin Nimtz is an aspiring trombonist currently attending the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts as a junior. He started studying music in middle school under the tutelage of Mr. Allen Dejan Jr., who is one of our other panelists as well, and Mr. Kelvin Harrison. Ardent student of the arts, Melvin wishes to pursue a career in music. All right, Melvin, take it away. Thank you so much to Melvin for grounding all of us in that. I know there would be a huge audience of applause, so that was quite beautiful. Thank you. All right. So we're going to jump into the research presentation. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm incredibly honored. First of all, I want to introduce the Education Research Alliance for New Orleans, which is a research organization that's housed at Tulane University and is dedicated to understanding the post-Katrina school reforms in New Orleans. So I completed my dissertation research while I was a graduate research fellow with ERA, and I'm presenting the results of that dissertation research today. And you should all know that arts education is incredibly important to me and close to my heart. I attended NOCCA. I worked for a long time as a visual arts educator. I began a youth mural program here in New Orleans, and now I am the programs director for the Arts Council of New Orleans. So I'm not going to be able to go into all of the nuance of my dissertation research in this 15-minute presentation. So I'd really encourage you all to read the policy brief. And for those who really want the deep dive, you can dig into my 300-page dissertation, which is also posted online. So I want to start a little bit with some framing about New Orleans. So as we all know, New Orleans is an all-charter school district. And as other school districts seek to implement charter school reforms, they're going to look to New Orleans for evidence of how that impacts education. And so in New Orleans, I really view test-based accountability and market accountability as these two potentially competing pressures on school. So on the one hand, we have test-based accountability, where charter school contracts are only renewed if schools meet really high standards of academic performance, with test scores really serving as a primary measure. And so what that means is that schools may feel this pressure to narrow the curriculum, which means focusing on the tested subject areas. And in New Orleans, we have a particularly aggressive use of school closure, where schools are actively shut down if they don't meet those test score standards. And so curricular narrowing might be even more prevalent in New Orleans than in other places. Now, on the other hand, the school system was really founded on the principle that families ought to have the power to choose where to send their children. And so families rank their preferred school options, and schools have to actually compete with one another to get enrollments. And so in theory, that creates what's called market accountability, where schools really have to meet the needs and interests of families. And of course, in New Orleans, we are internationally renowned for our arts and culture. We are an epicenter for arts and culture. And so families want that represented in their schools.
So in the midst of all of that, charter schools also have tremendous autonomy. So they can shape their curriculum, they can shape their staff structures, they can shape their budget according to what they think families want. And so in the midst of these kind of competing pressures on arts education, it's unclear how schools will respond. And so in my research, I was really interested in how schools operating within a system of accountability, autonomy, and family choice, how that would shape access to arts education. So today we're going to look at how New Orleans compares to other similar school districts in Louisiana. We'll look at arts enrollment across school performance type school performance score and school type. And then we'll look a little bit at how school administrators and teachers actually see the value of arts education in their schools, as well as what challenges they face in this unique school system. So a little bit about my data. I draw on both quantitative and qualitative data. The quantitative data comes from the Louisiana Department of Education, administrative data on course enrollments. The years that I'm looking at are from 2009-10 to the 2015-16 school year. Those were the years that I had reliable data for. And when I say art, I am including music, visual arts, dance, theater, and media arts courses that happened during the school day. Now, it's important to note that there were a number of limitations to this data that I was working with. All of you data nerds who are out there, I would encourage you to read the policy brief where I talk a little bit in depth about some of the limitations of this data. And I think it's important to recognize just because it tells us what we can and can't understand from the data. But I won't spend too much time on it here. The second piece of data was qualitative. So I conducted 28 interviews in 2018. Consisting of 11 school administrators and 17 arts educators across a range of disciplines, including visual arts, music, dance, and media arts. And those interviews represented 12 different schools across the school district. So we'll start off by looking at how New Orleans compares with other school districts in Louisiana. Now, this is really important because it tells us the extent to which the trends in New Orleans are really unique to our city versus just simply being a reflection of statewide patterns. So I'm going to compare New Orleans to East Baton Rouge Parish and Cato Parish, which includes the city of Shreveport. These school districts are really helpful comparisons because all three cities have a similar population size. They're similar in terms of student demographics and academic performance, and so they're helpful to compare our context. East Baton Rouge Parish also has a fair number of charter schools, so that can help us see how we compare to other charter districts. And then Cato is a more traditional school district with only a couple of charter schools. So what this graph shows is the percent of K-8 students that are enrolled in at least one arts or enrichment course of any artistic discipline during the 2015-16 school year. And you see East Baton Rouge Parish is the green line at the top, and then Cato Parish is the orange line, and New Orleans is the navy blue line. And we can see that New Orleans consistently had fewer of its K-8 students enrolled in at least one art or enrichment course compared to these other two school districts. But it is notable that East Baton Rouge Parish, which has a high share of charter schools, still does have the most of any district. So I think it's helpful to point out. This shows you the trends in high schools. So we can see that at the high school level, all three of the districts actually look somewhat similar to each other. The enrollment at the high school level is lower overall than K-8, and I think that that's related to a few different things. First of all, Louisiana students are all required to take at least one course to graduate from high school, so that ensures at least a minimum level of participation. But at the same time, as we all know, high school students have a lot of other graduation requirements and other electives to choose from, which can limit their bandwidth to take the arts. So we'll take a deeper dive into what New Orleans looks like, what types of art courses are offered, as well as how arts education offerings vary across different schools. So on the left-hand side, you can see what the K-8 enrollment looks like. Now, it's important to note that what you're looking at here is not the percent of students enrolled in each discipline, but rather how each discipline is represented as a share of all the arts enrollments. So you can see on the left-hand side that clearly music is the dominant form at the K-8 level, with about half of students enrolled, followed closely by visual arts, and then a much smaller share of theater and dance. At the high school level on the right-hand side, similarly, we see that music is the dominant form, followed closely by visual arts, but there is a little bit more variation where we see some more theater enrollments, fine arts survey, which is a multidisciplinary course, and media arts, but still very few dance enrollments at the high school level. Now, I also was really interested in comparing schools across school performance score. And the reason I did this is because of this concern that curricular narrowing might be even more prevalent in schools that are facing really significant accountability pressures. So I found that, in fact, there were not significant differences across school performance score. And in fact, at the K-8 level, the F schools actually had the highest average enrollment rate with 86% of students compared with 80% in A schools. And this is good news because it means that, that schools are offering, that they're not fully consumed by the accountability pressures. At the high school level, we can see that D and F schools had slightly lower enrollment than the A, B, and C schools. Now, where we do see a little bit more of a disparity across school performance score is in the percent of students identified as talented across school performance score. So for those who are unfamiliar, talented is the special education designation that identifies students as being artistically gifted in visual arts, in music, or in theater. And once a student is identified as talented, they receive several different types of services to allow them to cultivate their artistic talents. Now, traditional public schools in Louisiana are all required by law to identify and provide services to talented students, but charter schools are exempt from this law. And so I saw amongst my interviews that in quite a few charter schools, there was not a strong attempt to identify and provide services to talented students. And this results in this disparity that you see where students in A and B schools have greater access to talented services compared with students in the C, D, and F schools. And I found that often in A and B schools, entire classes were reserved for talented students, whereas those classes were rare to non-existent in the C, D, and F schools. And in those schools, often these talented services were structured as what's called a pullout, where students are pulled out at lunchtime or out of another academic class to receive their services. And this was seen as really less than ideal because it meant that students and teachers themselves were often, didn't take their services as seriously. Now, another thing that I looked at was how arts and enrichment enrollment rates varied across different types of charter schools. So what you're looking at in this graph is each of these individual orange dots represents a school, whereas the diamond represents the average enrollment between network and standalone schools. Now, a couple things I think are really important. First, you can see that there's really tremendous variation across schools in terms of their arts and enrollment rate. But on the other hand, we see that at both the K-8 level and the high school level, that standalone charter schools tended to have higher arts enrollment than their network charter school counterparts. And in the policy brief, I discuss a few different reasons for why that might be the case. So I'd point you to that for some explanations about why those differences between standalone and network charter schools. So I want to switch over a little bit into some of the qualitative findings and talk about how school administrators and teachers really perceive the value of arts education in this school system. So first, there were several benefits for students themselves. So my interview participants tended to focus on really 3 different areas of value for the students that they were teaching. The first was the academic benefits. So around 3/4 of my interviewees talked about the connections between arts and other academic subjects. They talked about the relationship between the arts and higher order thinking skills like problem solving, like creativity. And then in addition to that, there was really near universal agreement that the arts could increase student engagement at school. So the arts really motivated young people to want to come to school in the first place. It could really boost confidence, particularly for students who did not excel in the tested subject areas. Now, the second area of value for students was really around social and emotional transformation. About half of my interview participants really emphasized this aspect of arts education and talked about the socio-emotional benefits of the arts in terms of emphasizing creative expression, open-mindedness, this idea that there's no right or wrong answer in the arts. And in this view, arts education was really seen as an important escape from standardized curriculum. And so in this quote, a dance educator says, "Oftentimes we want them to be quiet so we can teach them, but if we always have them bound, then when can they be free and actually express themselves?" These emotional benefits were also really important for the educators I spoke with in thinking about a community like New Orleans, where a lot of young people are facing traumatic experiences, and this idea that the arts could serve as a language to help them process those traumas in ways that really foster resilience and growth. And then the third value for students was really centered on career opportunities. So this was less of a focus, but I had several arts educators who really were passionate about the underrealized potential of talented students in New Orleans and really wanting to see increased rigor and quality of arts education to really prepare talented students for higher education and for careers ultimately in the arts. Now, there were also some perceived benefits for schools themselves. The first was the benefit of arts education for marketing and recruitment. So as this high school administrator says, you put a good band on the streets for Mardi Gras, and that raises your profile as a school in New Orleans. So many of my interview participants saw that a key motivation for school leaders and CMO leaders was that the arts could really attract people to that school and help them stand out, which would increase enrollments and therefore secure the budget for the year. And there seemed to be kind of a drawback to this idea of arts education as really being for marketing, because arts educators felt like that marketing emphasis often didn't translate into the commensurate support for the nuts and bolts of what really makes a high quality arts education program. And then the second key value for schools was really around family engagement. So this idea that the arts could really draw families into the school and connect them to the school in ways that academic programs could not. So what challenges do arts education programs face in this environment? The primary challenge that was brought up almost universally in my interviews was this pressure to perform on tested subject areas. And so because this pressure was so strong, arts educators believed that instructional time for academics was often prioritized over the arts. And so educators felt really undermined in scheduling and administrative decisions. It also meant that you sometimes saw the arts being used for disciplinary purposes. So some schools had what are called enrichment detentions, where kids would be pulled out of the arts for disciplinary problems in their other academic classes. And arts educators often felt devalued, really as though they were kind of in a silo or on the periphery, not really central to what was core to what mattered to that school. And going along with that, there was also a perception that there were really limited professional development and growth opportunities for arts educators, and that to really have a successful program, arts educators had to really be willing to put in the work, put in the extra effort to be their own advocates. And that this was really exacerbated by being in a decentralized school system. So a KIPP music educator said, everybody is an island in this city. So it made it really challenging to kind of know what was happening across the school district, to have those opportunities to connect with one another in ways that you would in a traditional district. Now, I will say that school leadership really matters. So I did find time and again that the personal beliefs and values of the school leader were really essential in determining whether arts education would be supported at the school. So a school leader that was a deep arts advocate could really make all the difference at a school in using their charter school autonomy to really build effective and robust arts programs. And those school leaders were able to really effectively balance the demands of academic and tested subject areas with the joy that the arts could bring. So I do want to emphasize that, and I think that's why you see so much variation, and also potentially why you see the standalone charter schools often having these really robust arts programs. So to tie everything together, I think that test-based accountability absolutely impacted schools because of this pressure to perform, and often that showed itself in instructional time being limited and in professional development opportunities being limited. Now, there was a positive trade-off that I didn't discuss already, which was that arts educators really experienced vast autonomy and freedom to develop their curriculum, and so that was really perceived as a positive trade-off. When it came to market accountability, absolutely schools saw the value of arts education in attracting students and families, and frequently what that meant was that at schools there was a basic level of access to arts education that was offered, but really fewer opportunities for that higher level skills training. And then finally, that autonomy absolutely played a role in the school district in terms of how different schools and CMO leaders prioritized what mattered to them. So as we look forward, I'm really eager to hear what the panelists have to say in terms of what resonated with them about this. We are clearly in a time of tremendous uncertainty, of anxiety, of loss. And so as we think about how to support arts education moving forward, I have identified a few different policy options in the policy brief that I think can be useful. But I also would really encourage us to think about creativity as an integral part of life in New Orleans, and really as one of our city's greatest resource. And so I will leave us in closing with this beautiful quote from a music educator. Music is as much a part of who we are in New Orleans as the air that we breathe. The music is like an ingredient. It's like a mineral in the soil. It's part of us. It's really our DNA in the city. Thank you all so much.
Mute. You're on mute.
All right, we will now have a live panel discussion to discuss Dr. Woodward's findings and brainstorm ways we can continue to build and improve on our public school arts programming throughout these difficult times. For people in the audience, please leave your questions for Sarah, Dr. Woodward, and the panelists in the comments, and we can answer them during the Q&A session afterward. So we look forward to hearing your questions and answering them. But first, I would like to introduce our amazing panelists tonight. Mr. Allen Dejan is a music educator working at KIPP Morial. Allen has worked as a professional musician for 2 decades, performing locally, nationally, and abroad. He's taught at the K-12 and university level since 2007, and he currently teaches music at a New Orleans public charter school. Allen brings a unique perspective to conversations about arts and music education. He knows the importance of the New Orleans cultural economy and the role that a robust, supported arts education community plays in the development of young artists, future arts patrons, and the sustainability of our rich cultural traditions. Our next panelist, Ms. Terri Smith, is the principal at ENCORE Academy, an educator for over 35 years. Terri Smith is the founder and CEO of ENCORE Academy, an open admissions, arts-focused charter school in New Orleans. ENCORE Academy serves a diverse population of pre-K to 8th grade students providing 2 arts blocks for each student in music, theater, dance, and more. Terri founded ENCORE Academy as a school where arts would be valued as much as other academics. With ENCORE in its 9th year of operation, despite a higher accountability bar and the COVID-19 pandemic, Terri still believes that art can work very well alongside other academics. And Melvin Nimtz, and needs no other introduction. We've already introduced him. He will be sitting on our panel. We're very excited to have him. Analiese De Saw is the Gifted and Talented Visual Arts Educator at Akili Academy. Analiese De Saw is a native of New Jersey and a graduate of Rutgers University. She started her art teaching career in New Orleans at the Travis Hill School, located in the Youth Study Center. Ms. De Saw currently instructs gifted and talented art at Akili Academy in the historic Ruby Bridges School in the 9th Ward. She is a fellow of Eternal Seeds at Studio B and an advocate for youth justice reform in New Orleans. And our next panelist is Miss Dollie Eaglin Rivas. She is the Performing Arts Educator and Arts Integration Specialist at Audubon Charter School. She received Audubon's Teacher of the Year Award in 1998 and 2007. She received her BFA from the University of Louisiana in Lafayette and her MA degree from the University of Houston. She's traveled throughout the United States and Europe as a teacher, performer, model, and choreographer, has presented many, many workshops for teachers, and received multiple awards and honors for her work. So we are very happy to have such esteemed panelists who are all working right now in the public schools and will give us some of their insights and thoughts around the research that was just presented. So to everybody, first, I would love to hear everyone's initial thoughts from reading the policy brief and listening to the research presentation. What information really stood out to you from the brief and the presentation? What really kind of caught your attention? And I'm curious to know if anything really surprised you as well. And just remember to unmute yourself before you speak and just mute yourself afterward so everyone can talk.
So I was surprised by some things, and Sarah shared some of those things, but in the comparison of the K-8 schools in New Orleans and the districts, it was interesting that the K-8 schools had higher enrollment in arts. I was happy to see that. I was kind of shocked when I knew that music and visual arts would be right there at the top, but only 5% and 3% enrollment in dance and theater was a big disappointment to me, and that surprised me greatly. The other was the difference between standalone charters, since we're a standalone charter, and the CMOs and the opportunity for arts classes. Those were the things that stood out to me as being big surprises.
Yes, I as well. I agree with you about the standalone charter schools. That really caught my eye. I was like, oh, well, great, standalone charters. But I was surprised that the network charter schools, had a lower level percentage. And also the documentation on the F-rated schools having a high enrollment in the arts, which I think that's good. I think that's really good. And then the A-rated schools as second highest. Of course, that would be great if we were, the comparison with Baton Rouge and New Orleans, that was a surprise to me, because I really thought New Orleans was up at that same level as well.
I too found it interesting, the comparison between the network and the standalone schools. I do work for a larger network, and surprisingly, I think we fit on the opposite end. All of our schools do offer some form of it, but the distinction was some form of arts education, I should say. But the distinction was important to note. The other thing I noted was the curriculum narrowing topic that you dug deeper into in your dissertation paper, which I did read a little bit of. I found a connection also, not just a curricular narrowing as a result of the standardized testing emphasis, but also just curricular narrowing within the realm of arts education. As a music educator, sometimes it seems like our subject is the sage on the stage, and all the other disciplines are kind of secondary to what we do. And even within music education, particular elements of music education is given higher value than others. So that is something that I hope to dig deeper in as well. Thank you.
I'm going to echo a lot of people's sentiments right now and say that what really surprised me was the enrollment in F-rated schools as compared to even A-rated schools. I mean, the correlation between that is doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So that was kind of surprising. I don't really understand that. I would like to look more into that. And also the 100% enrollment in some schools and the 0% enrollment in other schools, and how there's absolutely no regulation in arts education across New Orleans is also really surprising. I guess it makes sense if you want to send your kid to maybe a sci-tech kind of school where they're going to focus on sciences and engineering or something like that. But especially through K through 8, where kids should be getting exposed to as many subjects and disciplines as possible, to not have that available to kids at all is pretty mind-blowing to me. So those are a couple of things that stood out.
Oh, and one more thing. I'm sorry. I have to be honest. I was completely surprised when that Louisiana law requires traditional public schools to identify students in talented arts, but not charter schools. That's surprising to me. I was really surprised because I thought, okay, that should be a law for all the students. If you have talented students, they should all be looked at, whether in charter schools or in public schools or standalone or network. That was my biggest surprise.
I agree.
So Celeste, if I could add, one of the things that I'm sure Sarah is going to be looking into this, but now that there's the 5% of the SPS score can be linked to participation in arts, I think you're going to find people changing their minds about arts enrollment.
Yes. We are very excited. I actually wrote that policy and pushed it at the state level. So I'm so excited that it's happening. And I think that it's really going to be an incentive to schools to invest in their programs because, they haven't been able to get that credit before for their having high quality arts and music programs across the state. And now they can. So I'm hoping in the next couple of years, it's going to make a big difference. Yeah. Any other surprises, thoughts, want to jump in, or should we move on to the next question? Okay. I want to give everyone a chance to kind of share your thoughts. So next question. This is kind of about the strengths in our landscape. Dr. Woodward's, it's a long day. Dr. Woodward's research showed that there are schools across the city, both lower and higher rated, who are offering strong arts programs. And that was one of the things that I thought was cool as well, that, schools across the kind of SPS scores were still offering some strong programming. What are some of the greatest strengths of arts education in New Orleans? You can talk about past strengths, but also what are the strengths that you're seeing now in the landscape? What's going well for us?
I would say, I've had a lot of experience, especially when I first started here, my first 3 years, of people reaching out to me to do arts programming. I've had people from UNO, Humanities Action Lab, Studio B, and also other organizations throughout the city who are really interested in getting in with kids and involved in making art. And I came here really not knowing anybody, and it just kind of fell at my feet. And so I don't know if I'm very lucky and fortunate to have that happen. But I felt since being here, this is now going on 4 years living here, that there's a great community that's easy to tap into if you just kind of like know who to tap at first, like who to tap on the back. So I think that New Orleans is unique in that sense, that also it has its own culture that is completely unique to not only like Louisiana, but really the world, if you think about it. And we're at an advantage as artists and musicians to delve into that a little bit more and really expose kids to, you know, the cultural heritage of their own city.
I always thought that the NORD program was really good with bringing the arts to the students, to the community, and the connection with Tulane University, because the dance program has a strong connection with the Tulane dance department, and also theater, So of course we know what's happening now, but the NORD program, I thought, is a very, very good program. Also, before Kid Smart, we had Arts Connection, which started with Orleans Parish. And they were Orleans Parish was always very supportive. And with the Arts Connection program, of course, that's the past, but I'm just bringing it up just in case you haven't heard of Arts Connection, but we would go into 2 different schools as full-time teaching artists. And we would meet on Fridays for PDs, for the artists, and we would talk about our strengths and weaknesses and share what's going on at the school. So that was great. Of course, that kind of disappeared after Katrina, but now we have Kid Smart. But we have a lot of organizations, as yourself with Dr. Key, that's strong and powerful in New Orleans and should definitely keep pushing forward.
Well, if I could jump in with, I guess, a student perspective, and particularly a music student perspective, throughout middle school and elementary school, living in the city that we live in, I thought there were a great many options available in terms of music education. There are a lot of options open to me, and I was lucky to receive some very good musical education.
Yeah, building off of what Mel was saying, I think in the K-8 realm in particular, there's a lot to celebrate there. And specifically within that, the early and middle childhood areas. If we contrast it with what was present pre-Katrina, many arts educators were working on an itinerant basis. They were split between several schools, 2 or 3 schools in the week, and they weren't dedicated to one site. There were a few exceptions, and McDonogh 15 was one I know of that did have a teacher that was assigned, well, several arts teachers that were assigned there permanently. However, comparing to now, many of our schools do have multiple arts teachers that are working there, contributing to that community and building the arts community within each school site.
I'm the moderator, but I think I'll jump in with this too, because it was a question that I was thinking about. Another thing I've noticed as a real strong strength is the level of connections between the artists, the artists and musician community, the cultural economy, and the schools. After Katrina, I went and taught in other districts for a couple of years and did not see that level of communication and connection where artists and musicians were working in schools and schools were partnering with organizations and artists. So there's a lot of cross-pollination in our artistic community with the schools that I think has been an ongoing strength here.
At ENCORE Academy, we have 8 arts teachers for 535 kids. And we are citizen scholars and performers, and almost every single one of our teachers, our arts teachers, is greatly involved in the community. They play in a variety of bands. The connections are just amazing. And like Analiese said, there is no shortage of talented people who are willing to step up and support a school in terms of the arts. One day actually it was yesterday, we were talking about adding an additional mural in the building. And I'm not kidding, within half an hour, we had an artist lined up who's ready to go because somebody made the right phone call. So it's truly an amazing city, for sure.
All right, I'm going to keep it moving because we have some more questions to get through. So Sarah in her research also pointed out that while schools may feel pressured to only focus on the tested subjects during the pandemic, now more than ever, arts education is essential for children. And we also know that the arts are vital to helping children express themselves and move beyond trauma, and that trauma-informed practices are going to be more important now than ever before for our children. What are some important next steps that we as an arts education community should be taking to ensure that arts education continues throughout the pandemic? So what are the biggest things we need to be doing to make sure children continue having access to the arts?
So,
go ahead, Terri.
So this is one that gets discussed a lot these days. We have kids that have been through a lot in the last 7 months. And as kids come back to school, I keep saying we need to allow them to be kids, and we need to make sure they're experiencing joy, because very, very many of them have not experienced joy. Historically, in our building, when people come to visit, they'll say things like, your kids are really happy, like that's a surprise. Or there's a lot of joy here in the school, which is absolutely true. But I think that we all collectively need to keep pushing. Yes, we have to keep the academic bar there, and that has to be the primary focus. But we cannot forget about the joy and just absolutely wrapping it around our children as they come back to school.
Yes, I totally agree. Here at Audubon, we see they get arts all the time. We've always had, because it's part of the core curriculum here. And since I've been here since '89, because during that time, Arts Connection, like what Mr. Allen was saying, I ended up being hired as a full-time creative movement arts integrated teacher here at Audubon in '89. So this is where, and I was taught and treated just like all the other teachers. It wasn't like, okay, you're on the side. It wasn't like that. I was treated the same, had the same benefits, had the same, even with planning time. But of course, every child at this school gets creative movement. Every child in the school gets visual art, all 460. So, but with the pandemic, of course, we have half in school and sort of half virtually. And we're still pushing forward with the arts program. And the children, yes, they're really excited to come. Oh, good, we get to do creative movement. We get to do arts integration. We get to do visual art still, even with this. So yes, it's a good break, and you can tell that they enjoy it.
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges I'm noticing that I think we all face during this time is continuing to advocate and continuing to remind everyone, including ourselves sometimes, that there is a place for our disciplines and for our arts, despite all of the things that have been cut, all of the restrictions that we have. Many arts teachers are being repurposed. Many arts teachers have lost their spaces inside of the school, yes, or because of movement restrictions that the children have to follow for health safety. They can't come to a familiar space for them. And mind you, our arts rooms, many art teachers have been at their schools through multiple years. So like we are the continuity, one of the continuity pieces inside of the school. We see kids from year to year as they grow. And that is something that has been disrupted by this pandemic. But we have to continue to advocate. We have to continue to remind the school leaders who are thinking more big picture we are the subject matter experts to remind them of our presence. Not that they've forgotten, but as they look at it from a zoomed out view, we have to be there to be the magnifying glass to remind them of the importance of what we do and what we are to the children.
Yeah, I think a lot of what is going to happen is like there's a lot of logistical setbacks right now, right? So like I teach 5 through 8 right now, and the kids aren't even back yet. When they are back, they're going to be back like part-time, and maybe I'll get to see them virtually, but like art isn't prioritized for kids in-house, which means that like there's certain projects that I just won't be able to do with kids because they can't have the supplies at their house. I can't give 150 kids, stuff to make paper mache and like make a mess in their kitchens. So like there's a logistical issue, and even with music. So like my dean and director at my school, she's the head of the music department. Well, you can't have a bunch of kids blowing into horns in the same room. So there's like, I understand there's like logistical setbacks. And so I think what the administrators and what we as teachers need to do is start thinking creatively and thinking outside of the box, because eventually kids will have to be back in school, but it's going to look very different. And we can't have school without a band or an orchestra or choir or dance, which are all things that like right now are deemed very unsafe. So I think in order for this to survive, we have to really evolve. And we just have to think of creative solutions to these problems, which is great because we're creative people.
Yes, of course, we have the extra work. I am so happy that I'm able to see my students in my classroom, because right now they're in pods, with their classroom teacher. And at first it was like I had to go into the classroom, but it didn't work, because of the desk. And so the administration, they're very supportive. I says, okay, well, I think they should come to my classroom because I have more space. So I, like you said, Annalise, creatively thought of a way to have them inside. And of course, I sanitize and mop the floor before every class. And then, of course, we can't do problem-solving activities when they work together. So now I have to think of, okay, you're doing solo activities, and here are the criterias, and it works, and it's a challenge for them, and they're enjoying it. So I'm really happy for the students to be able to think out of the box as well.
All right. Some really thoughtful, thought-provoking answers here. Again, I encourage everybody in the audience, whether you're participating on Facebook or YouTube, please leave your questions for the panelists, as well as Dr. Woodward in the comments, and we will be reading them and answering them in a little bit. But on to the next question. So we're talking about challenges, and I think we've covered some of this already. The educators interviewed by Dr. Woodward identified several major challenges to providing the arts in schools. Testing pressures, the decentralization of schools that makes it difficult to kind of coordinate services, scheduling issues, so schools having so many different things to schedule, and professional isolation of arts and music teachers. And I would also add to that the segregation of schools, especially after Katrina with the decentralization, where students may not have access that they had to programming. Have you all faced some of these or any of these challenges in your own work? I want to hear a little bit about the challenges that you faced, and also what are some new challenges that educators and students are facing due to COVID-19? I know that we've covered this a little bit, but let's talk kind of more in depth about some of the big challenges that we're facing now and the ones that we also see coming up.
Terri, you're on mute.
You're on mute. Okay.
Thank you. So a unique challenge that ENCORE faces as an arts-focused school comes out of the way we enroll kids in New Orleans. We are not a selective admission school. And when we have students who come to us, many times families just choose ENCORE because they live in the neighborhood, which is completely understandable. Everybody should have a great school in their neighborhood. However, and it usually happens with older children. We'll have kids that'll come in and they'll enroll and they'll say, I don't want to be in 2 arts classes every day. I want to play football. And it's been an incredible challenge. I mean, I always said, we're never going to have football, but we ended up joining the middle school league on Saturdays, just, to support kids in any way we possibly could. But the little guys get the foundational skills and they're incredibly happy to be in arts classes. But we always get this group of older kids that they really probably would be happier in another school because they don't want to face 90 minutes of arts instruction every day. So believe it or not, that has been a challenge that we've had to deal with. We allow our middle school kids to have choice. So they choose between 9 different arts classes, from strings to theater. So usually we have to, do quite a bit of maneuvering until they find something that they enjoy. But it is definitely a challenge, and I'm sure a high school administrator could relate to that.
Well, our French program and Montessori program directors with the principal, they get together and they schedule we're put in the category of specials. And as you know, like I said, I've been here forever, so I've been through different changes. At one time, there was a partnership with the teacher where we connected the curriculum. If she wanted to say, oh, I want to focus on the solar system. So they would hear that same vocabulary when they were in movement class, and we would focus on the solar system. Now it's called specials, and that's dance, creative movement, Chinese, visual art, PE, and we don't have music here. At one time we used to have vocal music, but and library, that's all part of specials. So they get together and create a schedule for us. And the main thing right now is to make sure that it's following the French program schedule and the Montessori schedule. And now we're basically planning time for the classroom teacher, which is fine. But the great thing and the best thing is the fact that the students, they're all able to get all of these specials. And then looking forward to the celebration of the arts that we're on the 32nd year, connected with Tulane University. But unfortunately now we can't do this. So we're trying something online, virtually, to have the kids do something creative. But yes, scheduling could be a big problem, especially now, because half of the students are here and half of the students are virtually. So that's the biggest problem right now. I mean, they have it corrected, but we never know what's going to happen the next week, if we're seeing the same class or it changes or whatever. But that's our problem right now, is the scheduling.
All right, Melvin, did you want to jump in as well? Because I know you're on a bit of a delay, but I know you might want to talk a bit about your challenges that you've seen as a student and some of the challenges that your fellow students might be facing right now in their arts programs.
Well, in terms of this COVID-19 situation that we're facing right now, in terms of arts, and I'm virtual completely right now. One of the biggest problems for arts is that, especially musical arts, is that a lot of the collaboration element is lost. We've made adjustments for that, and going to NOCCA, that arts is going to be a part of my education. But were I at a different school, or were I in middle school, that might be a lot more difficult in terms of scheduling. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? What are we
Yeah, I
seeing?
think if I could,
Go ahead, sorry.
yeah, if I can jump in on that too, about the collaborative aspect of it in all of our disciplines. That's the biggest part that I think is missing, especially with music, the being able to play with each other, wind instruments, singing, even movement collaboratively is the thing that's taking a huge hit with the necessary restrictions that we have to meet.
All right, so moving on, we've got a couple questions left, and we have some audience questions coming in, so I want to make sure we get to everything and everyone gets their questions answered. So this is another question that I have. So in polls, most of the community members that have been surveyed agree that the arts are necessary to help children and youth grow into well-educated adults. And yet we still have work to do as a community to ensure that all children have access. For example, Dr. Woodward found that arts enrollment rates vary widely across K-8 schools. We all brought that up, that some schools have all of their students enrolled in arts courses and then some of them have none, and there's kind of a wide range. So knowing that our community values the arts so highly, what are some things some ideas you have for closing that gap to ensure that more students have access to arts education?
I think there's a presumption, and I'm thinking back to my own schooling and when I was a kid, and there was an assumption when I was in school that only really talented artistic kids did art. So it was pretty intimidating to enroll in art because I was like, well, I don't really know how to draw that well. I may doodle a little bit, but you know, those kids are really, really good. Like they're gonna probably go to art school. And I always imagined that, you know, it was those kids were already kind of like naturally talented and gifted that were the ones to take art, as opposed to, you know, having it accessible for everyone in over a wide range of abilities, right? And so I think like one way to do it is to start it as early as possible. And like I've talked about this before, and I'll say it again, like exposure. Like kids are sponges. Whatever you put in front of them, they're going to soak up. And some of them are going to retain some of that, and some of them, you know, will take that and like kind of keep it moving. But I think one way to make it more accessible is to get kids invested, because if kids are invested and they want to do it, then I think parents are going to be the advocates for that, as well as the children, to tell the schools that like, no, we need to have a music program in our school. Like, how do you have school without music? Like that's crazy talk, right? Which might seem kind of crazy for us, but other people are like, oh, well, you don't really need music. Well, that's somebody who's never taken a music class that they liked who said that, quite honestly, probably, right? So I think investment and exposure are like huge for that. And also providing the right funds. You can't have a school where you have 2 art teachers teaching 300 children. I find like in a lot of schools, unlike you may have like 20 English teachers, but you have 1 art teacher. And that's a crazy load for anybody. So I think like investing in your teachers and building your program and getting that investment from the community is like all kind of tied into each other.
Yeah, if I can build on that, you hit it right on the head, Annalise. It's some schools, like for example, and I love it, but it's also very challenging. I serve 580 kids at my school. And other teachers who are teaching K-8 have the same caseload. Most K-8 schools right now are hovering between 700 and 1,000 children, I think, in terms of enrollment. And they may have 1 music teacher, or they may have 1 visual arts teacher. There could be a strong argument to maybe split that load a little bit more. Now, at my school, we have 2 music teachers, but even with primary and middle, it's a heavy load to bear sometimes. And investing in your teachers, investing in that is huge. Would provide a huge relief. Thank you.
That's a double amen from me for sure, because all the years that I've been here, I've had an assistant, someone that would help me because I'd see the entire school, maybe 2 years. the past couple of years I had, and then of course in last year, I no longer had anyone, but I would connect with the Tulane dance department where they had to do these service hours, and the dance students would come and help me. But yes, I totally agree, because putting together an entire musical theater, performance together, just me, myself, and I, is very difficult. And it would be great if the artists could connect and partner with each other. But we all overloaded with everything. But thankfully, it works out because thankfully there are some very supportive teachers that will help out, and again with connecting with the universities, the students there, they're helpful as well.
So, as somebody who has lots of arts teachers, I get asked the question a lot. How do you do it? How can you afford it? And we are not a school that has a philanthropy. That is not happening. We use the money that we get. And there are 3 obstacles, I believe. People who can't believe you can't do it. 1, 2, time, and 3, of course, money. When I wrote the charter application for this school, the finance guy said, you can't do this. You can't hire 4 teachers for 200 kids, because that's what we had the first year. And I said, yes, we will. And we just have to find other priorities. We prioritize. We're not top heavy at the school. And as a result, we put our money in arts education and social workers. Time, we have a long day. That is one of the obstacles. There are some families that just don't let their kids in school until 4:10 in the afternoon. But in order to get the academic program in and get 2 arts classes in for every child, you got to have a long day. And then finally, the other is just the belief that you can do it. If you want to do it badly enough, you'll find a way to do it. We managed to do it for 9 years, and I know a lot of school leaders aren't happy when I say, if you prioritize your funding, you can figure out a way to do it.
Awesome.
Strong administration, support from the administration is very important, because if you don't have that support, you're definitely in trouble. But administrative support.
Celeste, I know that there's a question out there about administrative support. But if you don't mind, I'm going to jump ahead here a little bit.
Do it. Yeah, we had a question about how school leaders can support art. So
I want to make sure this doesn't get lost. In the past, I've been asked to talk to people who are thinking about drafting a charter application. And whenever that happens, I always say to them, you have to have your school leader as part of the drafting of the application. They have to believe in the vision and the mission of the school. And it's too hard for somebody to come in when the school is already set, and then you say, okay, you're going to drive this arts program, or you're going to drive whatever program. You have to have a school leader who believes in the mission and the vision of the organization and makes it a priority, or it's not going to happen, because they probably have a board that is going to evaluate them based on academic performance and are you following all the rules and are you being fiscally responsible? They're not even going to think about arts programming. I know my board, when we started looking at all the budget woes that everybody is having this year, they said, we have to figure out a way to keep the arts program, and we did. So it can definitely happen. And it's all about the person who's driving it at the top.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That question was going to be for you anyway, so appreciate you answer it. We're going to have one more question from me, and then we're going to jump to the audience questions. And I actually wanted to ask you, Melvin, a question about, because we know that students, parents, and families highly value the arts based on their responses on surveys. What can students and families do to be involved in ensuring that arts education flourishes in our schools? I want to ask Melvin from the perspective of a student, but if anybody else wants to jump in as well about what students and families can do to advocate for arts education in their schools, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, I think that as a student, it's very important that we maintain interest, and as families, I think, should sort of appeal to their schools to sort of keep this arts education going, because it's something that's very important to us. So I think that process of appealing to the people at the top is important.
Great. Anyone else have thoughts on things students and families can do to be involved in supporting the arts and pushing for the arts?
I think we put a lot of emphasis on students and families, but we're servicing them, and we have to remember that. So what's important is keeping connected to a community and being very aware of the needs of that community. And we're the educators. I'm here to educate you, but I'm providing a service. So it's on the part of the parent to do some advocacy and for kids to also like speak up for themselves. But as educators, I think it's even more important that we go to schools, and as policymakers, we go to schools and districts and tell them, like, this is the community you have. This is who we're servicing, and this is what they need in order to improve it and to make this a whole community back together. Because we can't. Parents are already, especially with this pandemic. I mean, I have one of my parents. She, bless her heart, she has 8 children, and they are all in different grades. And she works full time, and she has a lot on her plate. And I feel like it's a lot also to ask for her to advocate for me on my behalf. What I need to be doing is making her job easier. So that's kind of how I think of almost like a role reversal. Like, Melvin, it's great what you do, but you're a kid. And you should still be a kid. It's, I'm the adult here. I should be doing stuff for you. So don't forget that,
All right. Well, we will move on. Thank you so much. We will move on to some audience questions. So Ellen Balkan asked on Facebook, and she works at the Ogden Museum of Southern Art. Without a central school district to help distribute information about arts education programs provided by arts organizations in the community, plus the complication of COVID, what's the best way for different organizations to communicate with schools and teachers to let them know about their program offerings? So how to get in touch with you all, I guess, is the question.
That is great, because I wanted to mention the Ogden Museum, actually, because the museums are offering some wonderful things. I get an email from them, and I think we should, as teachers, connect with our administrators, with the classroom teachers, and figure out a way how to do something virtually with the Ogden Museum and our students.
Yeah, I've noticed, there's a huge effort by community partners to try to connect the dots between the disconnected district that we have. Artist Corps New Orleans is one. They've, amongst the music educators, they've compiled a list of schools and a list of where different educators are positioned at the different schools, and they try to organize meetings and sort of establish a collective voice of the music educators. But leaning on the community partners is huge, because otherwise, as someone said, it feels like we're on an island. Now, if you're in a larger network, though, I'm fortunate in my situation. I'm connected to 12 different music educators within my singular network, but sometimes it feels like we're on a larger island.
Very true. I can also jump in and say, with my organization, I will, if people want to send me their programming and opportunities, I'm happy to help share them with schools. I know I've shared some things with schools already, but yeah, good answers. A couple of other questions. Oh, we've got a few questions. So this is from Sonia Robinson with Artist Corps New Orleans. She has a question for Miss Dollie. How to address the loss of collaborative art making? which is so fundamental to our practice across disciplines. So how do we deal with that we can no longer do collaborative art making in person?
Wow, that's a
big question.
Yeah, that's a good one. How do we address it? It's the collaborating with other teachers, or that's what I need to know. With
I think both. I think having students do collaborative projects and teachers being able to collaborate with each other.
Yes, but that's the thing. Everything has to be. We can't be. With COVID, we're all of our meetings are through Zoom or just several people in a large room. We could still collaborate, but it's difficult. I just take the initiative. Like if I'll ask the teacher or teachers, what are you working on this quarter? Or okay, and if they says, well, we're focused on types of clouds or landforms, because in Montessori they do this with manipulatives, and they'll talk about landforms. And I said, okay, because now I have my own materials, I have my own room, and give me the materials that you'd like for me, or tell me what you'd like for me to focus on. But because I've been here for a long time and I know the Montessori program, I have all of those resources myself. So I'll just ask the teacher, what would you like for me to focus on to integrate the arts into your curriculum? And as far as the students, like I said, it's more like working a solo problem solving activity. But the children, we all get to see what they're sharing, because they'll sit on their X and watch the child share what they've come up with. We talk about how to choreograph. What is choreography? What is focusing? How do you connect what landforms are prominent here in Louisiana? And so we go through all of that. We talk about that, and we just share. So I hope I answered the question, but if I didn't, just email me.
And we will be sharing, if the panelists want, I can share your contact information to the audience in case people have questions or follow up and want to connect with you. I have a question for Melvin from Kyle Weber at NOCCA. He wants to know, what has been the best and most challenging parts of being a virtual student?
Well, I think the most challenging thing about being a virtual student is trying to maintain focus and maintain work ethic, despite basically just being home all the time. And I think that one of the challenges was basically doing the same amount of work that you would do if you're at school. And that's quite difficult. I struggled with that a lot at the beginning of the quarantine, sort of just losing focus and work ethic. So that was a challenge. But I think the best part about virtual learning, I'll go with the arts route here and say that I had a lot of time to practice, a lot of time to get my material in order, get my technical facility on my instrument in order. And that's something that was really good about being online. That is good about being online, I think.
Great. Our next question from Victoria Whitaker. It's kind of similar to some of the conversation we've been having already, but what can we do to help students in New Orleans gain more access to the arts? Advice for tomorrow and also for the long term. What are your top pieces of advice on what we can do? It's a big question, I know.
So during this time with what's going on. I'm sorry, Alan. Go on.
No. So, and I've shared this before with other people. So I'll sound like a broken record to some people who have heard it. I feel like the arts, especially music, it's coming from three different sources, right? It's coming from the church, the community, or the school. And, you know, for something really, really great to be happening, you have to get it from 2 of the 3, right? So it's coming from multiple sources. And like, if we look at what's happening to the local arts community now, citywide, like they're hurting. The local music community is hurting. They're, you know, we just went into 3.1. There's not really a plan to, you know, get the music artists and the performers back on the scene. And how do we get students? How do we get them to gain access to the arts? Well, they need to see people performing in the arts. You know, they get it from us in school, but the community aspect is huge. And like, that's a missing piece right now. So of course, restrictions are necessary. However, there needs to be some thoughtful consideration in regard to how we get our culture bearers in a city like New Orleans that is it weighs so heavily on the arts. We need to get those people back in line, and we need to get them back on the back to contribute, I should say.
Absolutely. That's such a good point, especially bringing up the fact that this is an ecosystem. It's not just what's happening in schools, it's what's happening in our arts and music community right now, with the disenfranchisement of our arts and music community. So it's something that we're all going to be in this struggle together, not just in the schools, but across our arts and music community. And we need to be making those connections across the community. Anyone else want to jump in on that, or should we move on to the next question? We have a couple more audience questions.
One more thing. I think we need to encourage, like I was saying, encourage the teachers and administrators at the schools to invite community artists to the classroom virtually, you know, to talk about their work. I mean, even musicians, visual artists, whatever, you know, and we could find a way to support these artists that need, you know, of course, we'll pay what is $5 to go to this, on this field trip, $10 to go on this field trip, and you have to pay $10 for the bus as well. Why can't we do that where we could help the artist that way virtually, and donate money to that artist?
That's
I know it's a wild thing, but I mean, they would pay to go on field trips. When we were able to go on field trips, we can do something virtually and have a donation or for that artist, for that visual artist, for that musician.
That's a fantastic idea. I feel like we're on fire with some of these ideas, and we're going to need to have some follow-up conversations about how we can make these things happen. We've got a question from Matthew Zarba. This might be a question for you, Ms. Terri, but I think other people may have answers as well. But what sort of budget, if any, do schools typically have to bring in music education from community musicians and music education organizations? So what kind of budget do schools have to work with?
So as you can imagine, we have a tremendously large exploratory arts budget, and we're very fortunate because of all of the connections that our arts team has. Very often people who come in, they volunteer. And as Dollie pointed out, this is a very different time. And, you know, I love your idea of, you know, encouraging them to continue to do that, but the school makes a donation of some sort to support them at this time. But we normally don't, it's not absolutely necessary that we do that, because they're always dragging their fellow musicians and artists in so that the kids can meet them, which is really awesome.
All right, and we have a question from Courtney Egan asking, how can arts educators educate parents and administrators about how the arts are everywhere, not just in the gallery or the theater, but also in music, video games, film, basically all around us?
Oh, I would love to follow up on that one. I start off every year with my kids going over all the different forms of art and forms that art takes, because my favorite response when I ask children to do something is, I don't know how to draw. So when I try to say like, well, you know, art can be lots of things. It's like, well, no, art is just this one thing. And I'm like, well, you know, imagine the world without art. I just read an article not too long ago, and I really wish I remembered the people that did this survey. I think it was like a Gallup poll, and it was like during COVID, people did like a reevaluation of the jobs that they deemed were necessary, and arts was like at the number one, like most unnecessary occupation is like a job of an artist. And the irony of it is that that media that they used to show that was made by an artist. And so I also often ask kids, like, you know, imagine a world without buildings or music or clothes or any of this stuff that enriches your and enhances your life, really, like your sneakers that you're wearing, like that advertisement you read on the billboard, like all of this is somehow linked to arts. And just because you can't draw doesn't mean that you are not artistic. Just because you don't know how to play an instrument doesn't mean that you can't learn. And so I don't know, I relay that to children. And so hopefully children, you know, can pass that along to siblings and parents and things like that. But that's like one of my favorite early lessons of like Art 101. What is art? Art is everything.
All right, any other thoughts? We've got actually a few more questions, so we'll go for a few more minutes. I also wanted to read a comment because I'm looking at some of the comments, and I think this comment's really important by commenter 2, Aisha. I think I know who it is. But she said that we also need to, there also needs to be a racial equity lens put on by CMOs and administrators that has them truly viewing, acknowledging, planning, and acting around the importance of ensuring Black children specifically who are truly connected to this culture of art are receiving it. And children of color are also gaining understanding of why it is so important to this city, the neighborhoods, and the larger community. So I just thought that was a really important comment to speak specifically about the Black children in our public schools having access to their own cultural heritage, you know, to the depth of their cultural heritage. So.
Exactly. And I'm glad that comment was made because I've been involved with the Teacher Institute of Cultural Education at Ashe Cultural Arts Center. Mm-hmm. And they call it the other vitamin C. So their focus is on how young children learn race, how race awareness develops early childhood from infancy, promoting cultural, linguistic competency, arts and education, visual arts, music. They cover all of that. Music and movement, and they also practice the values of the Nguzo Saba, 7 principles, storytelling, poetry, all of that, racial identity and awareness, and this all led by professionals in their field. And I've been involved with that institute for several years now, and actually we just had one summer before last with preschool, and you know, when we bring out the importance of telling stories and having stories told by African Americans and seeing pictures of themselves. And I have thousands of books, seem like, but I have lots of books that I keep here, and we go through all of that. And it's like, you know, they need to see themselves. They need to, you know, it's evident that this has to be done, and not focus just on, okay, this is February, this is Black History Month. Well, I incorporate that Black history is part of world history, American history. So it's always in my lessons throughout the year. And here at Audubon, we have, actually I have the number of student ratio. We have the last count, well, we're going from last year, uptown here, it's 449 African Americans to 338 whites, 54 Hispanics, and 23 Asian. And at the end of the year count, it all went up. So yes, that's very important because they need to know that they're important as well. Because if you could remember that doll, you know what I'm talking about, the dolls with they showed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, they did one that was in God knows when, and they did another one in 2011, and it was the same thing. But then they had a couple of African American girls that was, I think they must have been third, fourth graders, but they had a strong cultural background where their parents or they went to a school that had a strong cultural background, and they were like, well, no, I'm proud of being Black. You think Black? Yes, Black is beautiful,
Mhm.
you know? So yes, that's very important.
Mm-hmm. And it's especially important in New Orleans where Black arts and culture are the lifeblood of this community.
Yes.
We need to make sure that children have access to their own heritage, their own history, their own culture. So thank you so much for commenting on that. We have a few more questions. I think we might run a few minutes over, if you all are okay with that, before we wrap up, maybe about 5-10 minutes. Let's see. So our next question is from Miss Teresa. In a city that thrives and survives on art and tourism, what are people's thoughts on trying to start an annual arts education convention or event that bridges the gap between our islands?
I like that idea.
We've, in my school, when I taught at the detention center in Gentilly, there's the month of October is Youth Justice Action Month. And so we would hold a gallery and social justice awareness, like gallery show locally during that month for the 3 years that I was there. I think that with COVID, it's going to obviously, again, that creative thinking and thinking outside of the box. Yeah, exposure, like I've been saying, is huge. And not only just getting people involved, but getting everybody together as a community to experience something together is also very big. I know Jam NOLA just did something really awesome by NOCCA, that they kind of figured out a way to get people all to experience something that's very immersive and very artistic, but also keeping it safe. So I think that a convention or some sort of arts related event, I had an idea once of having like an expose of almost like a gallery show that is all the schools in the community where kids K through 12 get to show their works, and people from everywhere from Lafayette and across the river can come and see the art. And now everything's going virtual. And there's something about, I think virtual is great, but there's something about tangibly seeing something and being in its presence that has a very different impact. So again, like some creative thinking around it. I think Jam NOLA did a really great job with their piece. But yeah, that's a great idea, Teresa.
Yeah, I wonder, there are tons of conventions all over the country where arts teachers convene. I think having something here would be an absolute wonderful thing. I do wonder, and this kind of ties into a question that follows: how do we get the administrators to go to that convention? How do we get them to show up and listen and participate in the convening of the artists and the people who are presenting the ideas? Because I think that's where we may start to move the needle, if you will. There was a comment in Sarah's work, in her research, from an administrator that said something about taking his or her eye off the ball. Well, if what is measured is getting managed, and they're not really measuring what we're doing, and it's not getting managed in terms of the importance, then let's get those administrators to the convention. That would be wonderful to me.
That's totally true. Because I would have to go back decades ago when we had Arts Connection and Leah, administrators participated in those PDs and participated in those workshops. We had a lot of classroom teachers learning arts integration, arts education during that time. Of course, it's sort of like disappeared, but I totally agree with you.
So as someone who's been in the charter world since 2000, I've gone to a lot of charter school conferences across the country. And, you know, I kind of envision this same type of structure. And to get to the administrator part, if you go to a charter school conference, there are a variety of tracks. So here you can do the same thing. And one of those tracks needs to be board chairs. It needs to be the finance people. There need to be the school administrator tracks. It can't just be the artists. You know, the artists are the ones that are going to drive everything for sure. But in order to get arts front and center to everybody, we have to have the right people in the rooms. I would love to see something like this happen. And maybe the first try is small scale and virtual, but you know, a year from now, we're planning something really big in New Orleans, and we're starting to look at people who would sponsor it. A lot of legwork involved in it, but I absolutely think that there are a lot of talented people in town who could make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if anybody's interested in working with us on an arts education convention or potentially sponsoring one, please reach out. I think it's a great idea, and it's something that we really should do together as a community. So please reach out. Let's start to wrap things up. I think we've got a question or two more. Looks like we've got another question from Sonia Robinson asking, oh, here, I think we're answering the questions as they're asked, asking, how do we move the needle on administrators understanding access to arts and music as an equity issue? So I think we talked about that a little bit, but any other thoughts on that, how we can really get school administrators on board, understanding that having access to arts and music, it's not just lagniappe or something that we would like to have in schools. It's something the kids need, and it's an equity issue that we're all providing that. What, any other thoughts on that?
I think it was Dollie that mentioned earlier the number of talented kids that are not identified in charter schools, and I think that it's really important that we push school leaders and teachers to identify kids who are potentially talented, get them screened and evaluated, even if charter schools are not required to do it. We have approximately 12% of our kids have been identified as talented in music, visual arts, or theater. And, you know, we want that to grow. And our population is predominantly Black and brown children. And everybody needs to be identifying those kids as well, because it's an equity issue.
Yes. I think I'm just so grateful that at Audubon, I guess because we were already an established school and then became a charter school, but we're still doing the same thing we've been doing. I'm happy to say that we have a total of 198 students receiving talented services. So we have like 97 in TAV, about 95 receiving TAT, and 6 receiving TAM. But then, because I got this information from our special ed coordinator participating in both TAV, TAT, and TAM. Actually, I've had several students that was in all the gifted, talented services. And of course, and they were very smart children. You know, they were very good in their academics, and they were very good in all of the art forms. So, and the student breakdown was 42% white, 40% African American, and about 7% Hispanic and 2% Asian in the talented arts program here at Audubon. but we need to keep that, because I know, and I'm sure you guys remember where a few years ago there special ed, special needs wanted to cut gifted and talented out totally, because they wanted the funds to go, all the funds go to special ed and special needs. And I'm like, oh, what's wrong with what aren't we allowed to look, test the gifted and talented students? So yes, and that's another thing, the monies were cut, the funds were cut from gifted and talented to give to the special needs children, which I'm totally for that, but not cut the whole gifted and talented program and says, oh, all the money has to go to them, and forget about recognizing the talented art students. So that was that meeting happened in Baton Rouge with the Bessie Board.
If I can contribute a thought also, I think it's important for us as arts educators to move past the idea of creating performative students, right? Students that are going to be out on Canal Street marching and being the showpiece for the school and putting up gallery showings for everyone. It's equally important to create patrons, to create listeners, to create audience members for the artists that we are nurturing in our school. Melvin was an absolute joy to teach and to work with. He worked so hard. It was wonderful for Mr. Harrison and I to be his teacher in middle school. But he's going to need an audience. He's going to need people to buy his CDs. He's going to need people to watch him as he's playing on the Grammy stage and wherever he ends up musically. And that is our job. We have to create listeners also, not just performers and showpieces.
Very true. Very true, very important. I also wanted to point out, someone just shared here that the Education Research Alliance also just recently came out with a study that found that Black students report better school climates and more emotional safety in schools with more Black teachers. So, protecting and nurturing our Black arts and music teachers, raising the next generation of them is going to be so important for us as well. I need to wrap things up because we're running a little bit over time. But in closing, I just wanted to thank Dr. Woodward for her important research. I wanted to thank all of you amazing panelists for giving us such an informative, thoughtful discussion. My brain is buzzing with new ideas, and I'm going to reach out to all of you probably to talk more about them. And I want to thank our audience members for taking time to engage in this discussion and bring such thoughtful questions to the table. I also want to thank the Education Research Alliance and the Arts Council for all their support with organizing this event. And most importantly, I really want to thank all of the hardworking teachers and students and parents in our community who are still teaching and learning through such unprecedented challenges. We see you, we acknowledge you, and we appreciate you. I just, before we go, wanted to mention a couple ways you can get involved with our work to support arts education in New Orleans. If you represent a school or an organization that provides K-12 arts education, we really want to get you on our New Orleans Art Look map. That's a project that we started last year, had a little delay with the school closures with the pandemic, but we're back. We've been hard at work building the map this year, and we'll be launching it very soon as a free public resource to find arts programming anywhere in the city. So if you are a school or an organization that offers arts programming, please go and put in your information so we can share it and promote it. And we will be launching that soon. So another thing, we are partnering with ArtistCorps New Orleans to host working groups that will develop policy recommendations this fall for New Orleans public schools to ensure that all of our students have access to arts and music throughout this pandemic. And this is really a place to make your voice heard to the district and to school leaders, since all that information will be shared with all of them. Educators, school leaders, organizations, teaching artists, students, families, community members, you are all welcome to be part of it, to provide input and help us draft the recommendations for the school district. We'll send out an email to all people that attended this event, but if you didn't register on Eventbrite, feel free to contact me so that I can help get you on the working group list as well. We would love to hear from you this fall. Yeah, thanks to everyone who attended. Thank you to all of our amazing panelists, and I am very proud to introduce a final performance by Melvin Nimtz to close us out. Everyone, please enjoy your evening, and please stay safe and dry this week. Thank you all. Are we all done?
Yeah, Mel.
Good job, Mel. That was amazing. Thank you so much.